Stop. Before you dive into this insane tale of quiet revenge, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications and smash the like button on this video right now. The price of silence and the empty gaze. She sat through the divorce hearing as silent as a statue, while her husband, Marcus Sterling, smiled and carved up their assets. Alba Vance said nothing. She didn't fight. She didn't cry. She didn't argue for a single euro more. He thought she was broken. A beautiful, empty shell he was finally discarding. He strode out of the courtroom with his young mistress laughing. 6 months later, that same laugh choked in his throat when he saw the paparazzi photos. Alba boarding the world's most exclusive mega-yacht in the Hamptons, welcomed at the top, not by a new lover, but by the one man who could utterly destroy him. The conference room on the 48th floor at Powers & Stone was a tomb of imported marble, suffocating gray upholstery, and the smell of old money. The recycled air, chilled to a precise 68 degrees Fahrenheit, felt too thin to breathe. It was a room built for the quiet, bloodless execution of lives, marriages, and fortunes. Across a vast, reflective mahogany table, Marcus Sterling watched his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, Alba Vance. He had to concede, she was still an aesthetic triumph. She wore a simple, sleeveless sheath dress in a cream tone that probably had a name like eggshell or oyster. It was designed to signal discreet expense, a taste he had cultivated in her. Her dark, nearly black hair was pulled back into a bun, so severe it looked painful, emphasizing her sharp cheekbones. But it was her eyes that unnerved him. They were a clear, crystal blue, and were fixed on the $5,000 floral arrangement in the table's center, as if it held the secrets of the universe. They were, he realized, utterly blank. There was no anger, no sadness, no anything. "As you can see, Alba," purred his lawyer, Kenneth "Ken" Powers, a man whose tailored pinstripes and reptilian smile cost $2,000 an hour. "Mr. Sterling has been exceptionally, one might even say profoundly, generous." Marcus allowed a small, indulgent smile to touch his lips. He was being generous. He was giving her the downtown apartment, a property he'd bought as a hobby studio a decade ago and had literally forgotten he owned. He was giving her a lump sum, a severance package, really. 7 figures, Ken had called it, as if it were a grand gesture. To Marcus, whose net worth was a number so large it was abstract, it was a rounding error. It was what he'd spent on Brittany's birthday weekend. He had braced for war. When he had first told her 6 months ago, it had been a calculated ambush. He had returned home from a business trip to the Hamptons with Brittany and simply informed Alba that he was in love and the marriage was over. He had expected the full operatic display. The shouting, the accusations, the tears, the "how could you after all I've sacrificed for you" speech. He had his responses ready. He had his checkbook open. Instead, Alba had looked up from the book she was reading. She had processed his words and, after a silence that stretched for 10 agonizing seconds, she had simply said, "I understand." Then she had closed her book, placed it on the side table, and walked upstairs. The next morning, she and a few suitcases were gone. No mess, no drama, just a void. Her silence had been disappointing. It had robbed him of his victory, the moment where he could be the magnanimous, regretful conqueror. Now, in this sterile conference room, her silence was simply irritating. "Alba," Ken urged, the silk of his voice fraying into impatience. "These terms, as I have said, are non-negotiable, but we require your signature to move forward." Alba's gaze finally lifted slowly from the flowers. It drifted past Ken, past her own lawyer. A mousy, middle-aged woman, named Martha Chen, who looked utterly out of place, and landed on Marcus. He held his breath. He was prepared for hatred. He was prepared for tears. He was not prepared for the courteous, impersonal blankness he saw. It was the look you would give a stranger on a crowded subway, a split second of acknowledgement before you averted your eyes. She was not looking at her husband. She was looking at an obstacle. "I accept the terms," she said. Her clear, low voice did not tremble. It was the first time he'd heard it in months, and it was the voice of a stranger. Marcus almost flinched. He had wanted her to fight. He had wanted to win that fight. He had wanted to tell her, "Alba, be reasonable. This is for the best. I need to be happy." Her silent, immediate capitulation felt like a trick. It was unnatural. It only confirmed his private, lifelong diagnosis. She was weak, fragile. She had built her entire existence on the scaffolding of his life, and now that he was taking it away from beneath her, she was simply collapsing. Her lawyer, Martha, looked visibly relieved, as if she had expected her client to be shredded. She fidgeted with the thick stack of documents and slid them across the polished wood. "Ms. Sterling," Martha began. "Alba, are you sure you don't want to?" "I'm sure," Alba said, cutting her off. Not with contempt, but with a finality that made even Ken Powers sit up a little straighter. Alba reached into her simple, unbranded leather handbag. She ignored the row of shiny silver Mont Blanc pens, laid out like surgical tools. She pulled out a cheap blue plastic Bic pen, the kind bought in packs of 10. She clicked it. The sound, a sharp snap, was obscenely loud in the quiet room. She did not read the documents. She simply flipped to the final page. She signed her name. Alba Vance, not Alba Sterling. She had already taken her name back. She capped the pen. She stood up. She nodded once, a quick, dismissive gesture to her own lawyer. She did not look at Marcus. She did not look at Ken. She picked up her bag and walked toward the huge oak doors. "Alba, wait," Marcus said, standing up. It was an involuntary impulse. She stopped with her hand on the brass doorknob, but she did not turn around. "For what, Marcus? You're free. Isn't that what you wanted?" She opened the door and left. The sigh of the door closer was the only sound. Ken Powers exhaled a long, slow breath. "Well, that was the easiest high-profile divorce of my career. That lump sum, Marcus, huh? She'll be back in 6 months when she runs out. She doesn't know how to manage herself." "She'll be fine," Marcus said, sinking back into his chair. He loosened his Hermes tie. "She's resilient." He was already pulling out his phone. He texted Brittany, waiting at the grill for a celebratory lunch. "Done. Order the 82 Patras." He felt a profound, euphoric sense of relief. He was free. He was headed to Miami next month to close the Apex deal, the one that would make him a legend. He was headed to a new life with a worshipping 24-year-old. He was Marcus Sterling, and he had just won. But tell me, dear viewers, what do you think? Do you believe Alba is truly broken, or is her silence a calculated move? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Then, as he rode the elevator down in a mirrored steel cocoon, why did the image of her blank eyes and that cheap plastic pen give him a sudden, untimely chill? He shook it off. It was just the echo of a life already ended. The quantum awakening. Calculated silence. Alba Vance did not take a cab to a friend's house. She did not go to a bar for a strong drink. She did not go to the airport to find herself in Italy. She took the subway, an anonymous face in the evening crowd, and went to the downtown apartment. The one Marcus had so generously allowed her to keep, not knowing it had always been her legal and emotional escape pod. The apartment was the antithesis of the opulent, suffocating penthouse she had shared with Marcus. The penthouse was all gold leaf, dark woods, and heavy silks, a museum Marcus had built for himself. The apartment was a clean, white box. It was a space of hard surfaces, white walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the brilliant, impersonal grid of the city. The main living room was not dominated by a sofa, but by a custom-built workstation. 3 4K monitors, a server tower humming quietly in a vented cabinet, and a keyboard that clicked with the satisfying mechanical precision of a weapon. She walked to the console table by the door and placed her keys in a small, white porcelain bowl. She removed her shoes. She went to the minimalist kitchen, pulled a bottle of sparkling water from the fridge, and drank with a hand as steady as a surgeon's. She hadn't been silent for the last 6 months. She had been meticulous. Marcus Sterling had made the most common mistake of powerful men. He had assumed a lack of ego meant a lack of intellect. He had met Alba at a modern art gallery opening. He saw a stunning, quiet art history major. He saw a woman who was content to be a beautiful, placid accessory. He did not see the other Alba. The Alba who graduated from MIT at 19 with dual degrees in mathematics and quantitative economics. The Alba who, before she turned 21, was the most sought-after analyst at a secretive hedge fund, so exclusive it didn't have a name on its building. She had built the predictive algorithms that saw the 2008 crash coming 6 months before anyone else. She had given all of that up for Marcus. He had found her intelligence intimidating. "I don't want to come home and talk about derivatives, Alba," he'd laughed early in their relationship. "I want to come home and just be. I want a partner, a wife." So she had become one. She had put away her brilliant, restless mind, hiding it behind a mask of placid elegance. She learned to plan his galas, manage their 3 homes, and listen politely to his monologues about killer instincts. She had believed, for a brief, foolish time, that it was a fair exchange for love. The day she found a single blonde hair extension and a Cartier earring in his travel kit was the day the exchange was canceled. But it wasn't the cheating that sealed Marcus's fate. It was what she found 3 days later. She was in his study, a room he called the sanctuary, looking for a tax document. Marcus, despite his genius, was an organizational slob. He threw everything in drawers. Tucked inside an antique, leather-bound copy of The Art of War, a book she knew he had never read, was a small, matte black encrypted hard drive. It used the same password he used for everything, the stock ticker of his first big win, APX1. It took Alba less than 4 minutes to circumvent the basic encryption. It took her the rest of the night to comprehend what she was looking at. Marcus was not just a shark. He was a high-level criminal. He was executing a sophisticated, multi-year securities fraud. He wasn't just cheating on her. He was cheating everyone. He was using a web of shell corporations, Swan Ventures, Nautilus Group, to artificially inflate the value of his private equity holdings before offloading them onto his own investors. It was a classic pump and dump, but on a scale that was breathtaking in its audacity. The apex deal, the one he was moving to Miami for, was to be his masterpiece, a massive final score, before he cashed out, leaving his partners and investors holding a multi-billion-dollar bag of worthless stock. Alba sat on the floor of his office until the sun came up, the glow of the laptop lighting her face. She felt no anger. She felt no betrayal. She felt cold. It was the clean, pure, exhilarating cold of a complex equation finally balancing beautifully. The trophy wife died on that floor. The quantitative finance expert was reborn. She copied the drive. She spent the next 2 months not at spas or lunches, but in this apartment. She tracked the money. She cross-referenced every transaction. She learned to code in 3 new languages to follow the data trails through untraceable servers in the Cayman Islands and Eastern Europe. She built a file, an unassailable, mathematically certain data case, that would not only put Marcus in prison, it would dismantle his entire empire. That was when she realized why she couldn't argue in the divorce. To argue meant attachment. To fight for his generous settlement meant accepting his dirty money. She wanted none of it. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was a quarantine. Now, standing in her kitchen, she finished her water. She walked into her bedroom. On her dresser, next to a single-framed photograph, sat a satellite phone. The photo was of her at 20, in a cap and gown, standing next to a burly, silver-haired man. She picked up the phone and dialed the single number in its memory. A voice answered on the first ring. It was a deep, cultured baritone, with an accent that was a mix of British and something unmistakable, like a man from everywhere. "Hayes," the voice said. "It's done, Victor," Alba said. "The divorce is final. I am legally clean. No conflict of interest." There was a pause, then a low, appreciative laugh. "Excellent. Marcus's Apex deal is entering its final phase. He presents to the board in Miami next month." "I know," Alba said. "He has programmed his own execution. He thinks he's a lion, Victor. He's just a lamb walking into the slaughterhouse." "The jet is fueled at Teterboro. Take off when you like," the man said. "The Sovereign is already docked in Saint-Tropez, and Alba—" "Yes, welcome back. The world has been too quiet without you." Alba looked at her reflection in the dark window. The pale, vacant woman from the lawyer's office was gone. In her place was a woman whose eyes gleamed like cut steel. "I'm not the one you have to worry about being quiet," she said, and ended the call. The apex predator. Marcus Sterling felt, for the first time in his life, invincible. Life after Alba was a spectacular high-definition upgrade. Brittany was a supernova, an explosion of blonde hairspray, ecstatic tans, and vocal adoration. She was, also, he was discovering, spectacularly expensive, a beautiful purring machine designed to convert money into noise and Instagram posts. But that was fine. The Apex deal was about to make him a legend. He was sitting in the sky lounge of his new penthouse. He had sold the one he shared with Alba. Too many stale memories, as Brittany directed a moving crew, installing a gigantic chrome horse-shaped lamp. "Isn't it divine, Bear?" she cooed. "It's minimalist. It says we have power, but we're playful." "It's something, honey," Marcus said, scrolling through his emails. "Now I need you to quiet down a bit. Daddy's working." "You're always working," she pouted, leaning over his shoulders. She smelled of champagne and Baccarat Rouge. "Is it about the Apex thing? You're going to be brilliant. You are brilliant." "It's not the deal," Marcus snapped, his good humor evaporated. "It's Hayes, Victor Hayes." The name was a curse word in Marcus's circles. The man was a myth. Old money so deep it made Marcus's fortune look like a lottery win. Hayes ran his global empire, the Hayes Group, from an undisclosed location, rumored to be his 500-foot Mega-Yacht, the Sovereign. He was the one investor Marcus needed to make the Apex deal not just successful, but a home run. Hayes's involvement was the stamp of legitimacy. It would draw in the last of the skeptical institutional money, and for 3 solid months, Hayes had been a ghost. "He's dragging his feet," Marcus said, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "My presentation to the board in Miami is in 2 weeks, and his people just keep pushing back. Mr. Hayes is evaluating the data." "What data?" "It's the cleanest, most profitable deal of the decade." "Maybe he's just jealous," Brittany offered, kissing his temple. "He's old. You're you. You're the future." Marcus smirked. She was simple, but he liked that. "You're right." A few days later, he was at a celebratory dinner with his partners. He was in high spirits. He had just bought a new Ferrari to match Brittany's. He passed his phone around, showing a small item on page 6. It was a grainy telephoto lens photo of Alba, of all people. She was sitting at an outdoor cafe in Paris, wearing sunglasses and reading a book. "See?" Marcus crowed, laughing. "That's my ex. Looks like she's handling it well. On her eat, pray, love journey. Good for her. No hard feelings." His partners laughed with him. Brittany, sitting on his lap, giggled. "She looks so boring. I bet the book is about feelings." Marcus laughed. The pang of discomfort he'd felt after the divorce was completely gone. He almost felt pity for Alba with her little apartment and her sad solo trips. She was a footnote. The sovereign legend. The queen returns for her throne. The next day, as he was packing for Miami, his world shattered. He was at his desk, signing off on the manifest for his private jet. Brittany was in the other room, arguing with her stylist about what to wear for the Grand Prix. His private line rang. It was Ken Powers. "Marcus, we have a problem. Bad timing, Ken. I'm heading to the jet, heading to Miami." "You're not going to Miami, Marcus. Not for this meeting." Ken's voice was tight, thin. "The board just postponed it indefinitely." Marcus stopped the pen hovering over the paper. "What? They can't. By what authority? It's my deal." "Hayes," Ken said. "He didn't just stall, Marcus. He moved against you. He sent in an auditor, a new firm. One I've never heard of." "But we're clean," Marcus yelled. "The books are clean." "Are we, Marcus? Are we really?" Ken's voice suddenly became very cold. "Because this firm, Vance Analytics, they sent over a file, a preliminary findings report. Marcus, it's everything. The shell companies, Swan, Nautilus, the timelines, the Cayman accounts. It's data I never saw. Data you assured me didn't exist." A cold sweat broke out on Marcus's skin. The pen in his hand snapped. "Vance. Vance Analytics," he whispered the name, tasting ash. "That's the name on the letterhead," Ken said, his voice grim. "And they aren't just auditing. They've submitted a parallel bid, a hostile takeover of the entire Apex portfolio backed by the Hayes Holding Company." "Vance?" Marcus's mind was racing. It was a coincidence, a common name. It had to be. "Who runs it? Who is this Vance?" There was a long, awful silence on the other end of the line. "That's the part you're not going to like, Marcus," Ken said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The CEO, the lead analyst, the one who signed off on the report. It's Alba." Marcus's phone slipped out of his hand. It clattered to the marble floor and slid, Ken's voice a small, frantic buzzing sound. "Alba. Alba. The quiet wife, the art history major, the woman reading a book in Paris." He remembered her face in the conference room. The blankness, the utter lack of emotion, the cheap plastic pen. It hadn't been defeat. It hadn't been weakness. It had been contempt. The Parisian cafe on page 6, where Alba had been seen, was, in fact, the private, high-security terrace of a bank in Geneva. The book she was reading was the final draft of the 200-page due diligence report on Marcus Sterling's entire fraudulent career. Vance Analytics wasn't a new firm. It was a resurrected one. It was the name of the consulting business Alba had dreamed up in her MIT dorm room, the one she'd planned to start before Marcus convinced her his life was better. She had registered the name 2 days after finding the hard drive, the settlement money, the generous 7-figure lump sum. Alba had walked out of the lawyer's office to her apartment and, in her first official act as a free woman, transferred the entire amount to a charity fund for victims of financial crime. It was a poetic act of cleansing, a market correction. She didn't need Marcus's dirty money. She had her own. Before she met Marcus, her former boss, the man who had pulled her out of the MIT PhD program, had named her a partner. When she left, she didn't just walk away. She had placed her shares in a blind trust managed by a discreet firm in Zurich. For 8 years, while she planned charity balls and chose upholstery, her original stake in that fund had been compounding. It was invested in the very algorithms she had built herself. When she reactivated the account 6 months ago, she had stared at the number on the screen. She was, and had been for years, massively independently wealthy, far richer than Marcus ever knew. She had cashed out a fraction to fund Vance Analytics. She had rehired her old team. Ravi, her data mining genius who could pull a password out of thin air. Anya, her forensic accountant who could follow a single euro through a hurricane of shell companies. They had been working out of a rented, secure office in Geneva, and they were all fiercely loyal to the woman they thought had just been on sabbatical. Her first and only client was Victor Hayes. Victor wasn't just an old boss. He was the man in the photograph. He had been her mentor, a surrogate father, and the most dangerously legitimate businessman in the world. He had been angry when she'd retired at 22 to marry the flashy, second-rate bond trader with good hair. Alba, sitting in her white box apartment, had made the call. "Victor, it's Alba Vance." "Alba," he had responded, his voice filled with warmth and sadness. "It's been 8 years. I thought you were cataloging art." "I was," she had said, her voice flat. "Now I am cataloging a high-level securities fraud. Your apex target and your potential new partner, Marcus Sterling." The warmth in his voice faded, replaced by a chilling precision. "Go on." She laid it all out. The shell companies, the backdated options, the wash trading to inflate volume, the timeline for the final pump and dump. She spoke for 10 minutes, an uninterrupted stream of data. When she finished, there was a long silence. "How do you know this?" Victor asked. "He's sloppy," Alba said. "And he thought I was stupid. He kept the data on an encrypted drive. He used the ticker of his first stock as the password." Another silence, this one vibrating with what sounded like suppressed laughter. "And what do you want, Alba? Vengeance?" "Vengeance is emotional, Victor. This is a balance sheet," Alba said coldly. "Marcus isn't just a bad husband. He's a bad risk. His entire company is a house of cards. His apex deal is the kerosene, and he's about to light the match. You will lose your investment, and hundreds of your partners will lose their pensions. So you call to warn me?" "No, I call to make a proposal. You hold your investment. You stall. You demand a third-party audit. And that third party," she said, "will be me, Vance Analytics. We will not only expose the fraud, we will find the real value. Because he is so focused on the scam, he has missed the actual assets. And when the company collapses and the feds step in, we'll be waiting. We won't just short it, Victor. We will buy it. For pennies." This time, Victor Hayes laughed. It was a deep, powerful sound, like an engine starting up. "He took your best years, Alba." "He took my time," she corrected. "I'm charging him for it now, at my old rate, plus interest." "The jet will be at Teterboro at midnight," Victor said. "Welcome back, Ms. Vance. The world has been too quiet." The old king's sunset, Marcus Sterling, was a man in freefall. The report from Vance Analytics wasn't just a report. It was a detonation. It hadn't just gone to the board. Alba had, with surgical mathematical precision, sent copies to the SEC, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, and the coup de grace, the Wall Street Journal. The story broke on a Tuesday. Sterling sidelined. Marcus Sterling's apex deal revealed as a house of cards. The article quoted extensively from the report, praising the anonymous Vance Analytics as a new, razor-sharp firm whose analysts possessed an almost prophetic understanding of market fraud. It called it a masterpiece of financial data investigation. The fallout was immediate. His assets were frozen by noon. His partners, the ones he'd laughed with about Alba, filed a $500 million lawsuit before 3 p.m., naming him personally. The SEC opened a formal public inquiry. His name, once synonymous with aggressive success, was now toxic. He was in the penthouse, surrounded by Brittany's chrome horse lamps and white fur rugs, watching his life dissolve on a CNBC loop. "They're calling you a fraudster," Brittany whispered, her face pale beneath her tan. She held her phone, her thumb frozen over her Instagram feed. "Marcus, my followers are asking questions." "Shut up," Marcus roared, hurling his empty whiskey glass at the screen. "She did this, that snake, that quiet, boring snake." He couldn't reconcile the two images, the quiet, submissive wife who organized his socks, and the ruthless corporate assassin who had just vivisected him in the Wall Street Journal. How had he missed it? He had lived with her for 8 years. How had he never seen her? The answer, agonizingly clear, was that he had never looked. He had only seen his own reflection in her eyes. "Marcus," Brittany said, her voice shaking. She wasn't pale anymore. She was angry. I just tried to buy a ticket to Aspen to go to my mom's. My Amex was declined. The black card, the one you gave me." "The assets are frozen, Brittany. It's temporary," he screamed, clutching his hair. "It's a misunderstanding. I'll fix it. Fix it. Fix it," she shrieked. "You lied to me. You said you were a king. You're a criminal. My mom called me. She said I'm on page 6 as the fraudster's tart." She grabbed her pre-packed Louis Vuitton duffel. She was always ready for a quick trip, and sprinted for the door. "So that's it," Marcus laughed, a broken, ugly sound. "The money's frozen, so you leave." "I can't be part of this," she sobbed, stabbing the elevator button. "You said she was nothing. You said she was simple. You're the simple one, Marcus. Your boring old wife took you down." The elevator doors opened. She was gone. Marcus was alone. His phone rang. He looked at it. Ken Powers. He ignored it. It rang again. Fernando Diaz, one of his oldest partners. He ignored it. The intercom buzzed. He ignored it too. He sat for a long time. The silence of the penthouse was deafening. He was broke. He was ruined. He realized, with a chill of pure terror, that he was going to prison. Unless a fresh, desperate, insane idea formed. A final, pathetic ploy. He had to talk to her. He had to see her. If he could just see her, he could... What? Apologize? Plead, remind her of the good times? He didn't know. He only knew he couldn't face the police. He couldn't face his partners. He had to face her. He knew where she would be. The papers had said Hayes was in town. Hayes was in Saint-Tropez for the Grand Prix. She would be there. He rushed. His cards were dead. He went to his safe, the one behind the abstract painting. He had emergency cash. Escape money, he had called it. $100,000. Brittany had never known. He took all of it. He grabbed his passport. He didn't pack a bag. He slipped out the service entrance, a fugitive, in his own building. He found a pawn shop in the Diamond District. He sold his watch, a Patek Philippe 5711, the Nautilus. The irony was bitter. The man laughed at him. "This is hot, isn't it? It's real," Marcus snarled. "Sure, buddy." The man gave him $10,000 for a $150,000 watch. Marcus took the cash. He used it to buy a last-minute, one-way first-class ticket. Even in ruin, he couldn't fly coach. He was headed to Saint-Tropez, not for a meeting, but for a confrontation. Saint-Tropez's port was a different world. It was a forest of white masts and gleaming superstructures, a bright display of obscene gravitational wealth. The air was thick with the smell of diesel, salt, and money. In the distance, the sharp, hornet-like scream of a Formula One car practicing on the circuit echoed off the hills. Marcus Sterling looked like a ghost at the feast. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. His $10,000 Savile Row suit was crumpled and smelled of airplane whiskey. His face was a gray, 3-day stubbled mask. He'd had to take a taxi from the Nice airport, and the driver had scoffed at his crumpled $100 bills. He was a refugee in the land of kings. He stood on the dock, shoved by tourists and arrogant polo-shirted yacht crews. He didn't have a plan. He only knew, with the nesting instinct of a dying animal, that she was there. And then he saw it. It wasn't just a yacht. It was a statement. It was a weapon. The Sovereign, docked in the port's billionaire row, it stood like a pale gray shark, dwarfing every other vessel. At 500 feet, it was less a ship and more a floating headquarters. It had tinted, bulletproof glass, a helicopter on the stern deck, and men in subtle dark blue uniforms patrolling the perimeter with headsets. It belonged, of course, to Victor Hayes. Marcus stared. This was the world he had been trying to get into. Now he was outside, looking like a street urchin at a banquet. He watched for an hour. He saw sheikhs and tech billionaires ferried to the stern in sleek black tenders, only to be politely turned away by Hayes' security. Then a different tender approached. It was military grade, low profile, and terrifyingly fast. It docked with practiced efficiency. Several figures in dark, professional-looking suits disembarked, followed by a woman. Marcus squinted against the bright Mediterranean sun. It was her, but it wasn't the Alba he knew. The cream-colored wife dresses were gone. She wore a tailored, off-white Loro Piana pantsuit, razor sharp. Her hair, which he used to require her to wear long and soft, was cut into a severe bob that brushed her jawline. She wore dark, angular sunglasses that obscured her eyes. She had a Cartier watch on her wrist, a new one, a complex model he'd never seen. She was flanked by her team, Ravi, the data genius, and the shrewd Anya. She was walking up the gangplank, and she was laughing. It was a low, confident sound. She was pointing something out on a tablet, and the men around her were listening, nodding, absorbing her words. At the top of the gangplank, one man waited. He was older, with a shock of silver hair and a deeply tanned face, who radiated a power that made Marcus's own personality seem like a cheap costume. Victor Hayes. Hayes did not greet her like a date. He did not kiss her cheek or take her arm. He shook her hand firmly, like a partner, like an equal. Marcus felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage adrenaline burning away his fear. It was a sickness in his stomach. He had been replaced. She had simply moved up. Alba! The name was torn from his throat, a raw, desperate animal sound that echoed across the water. The laughing stopped. On the deck of the Sovereign, Alba froze. The men around her tensed. Hayes' head came up, his eyes scanning the crowd with terrifying speed, instantly finding the disheveled, frantic man on the dock. One of the deck security guards unbuttoned his jacket. Alba! Marcus screamed again, stepping toward the water. You can't. It was our life. You can't just do this. Alba turned around, slowly. She took off her sunglasses. Marcus waited for the shock, the anger, the pity, the something. There was nothing. Her eyes were exactly as they had been in the lawyer's office, vacant, impersonal, cold. It was the gaze a scientist gives a specimen in a petri dish, a problem that has already been solved. She stared at him for 10 full seconds. The entire port seemed to go silent. Marcus could feel the eyes of the tourists, the security guards, Hayes himself, all on him. He was the show. Alba's gaze was so cold, so final, that it shattered the last of his rage fits, leaving only hollow, echoing terror. Then, with an almost imperceptible tilt of her head, not a nod, but a simple, devastating acknowledgement of his existence, she turned her back on him. She put her sunglasses back on. She said something to Victor Hayes, who smiled. As Marcus Sterling watched, broken and bankrupt on the docks, Alba Vance, his quiet, simple ex-wife, walked into the heart of the sovereign, disappearing into a world of power he could never, ever touch. He fell to his knees. His scream of pure, pathetic rage was lost in the sudden, deafening roar of a Formula One car speeding past on the nearby track. The heavy, soundproof glass door of the sovereign's main salon closed with a pneumatic hiss, instantly sealing them off from the outside world. The final anchor, the balance sheet balanced, Marcus's distant, desperate yell, and the sharp whine of the F1 cars were erased, replaced by the deep, vibrationless hum of the ship's stabilizers and the whisper of cool, recycled air. The room was not a lounge. It was a command center, where Marcus's penthouse was a monument to his ego, all gold, black marble, and hard, reflective surfaces. This room was a statement of pure, unadulterated power. Victor Hayes was already standing by a discreet bar, pouring a single glass of what looked like sparkling water. He hadn't sweated. He hadn't even flinched. He simply looked at Alba, his summer sky eyes crinkling with amusement. "Well," he said, his deep voice resonating in the quiet. "That was a bit of a dramatic performance. He has a flair for the theatrical. I'll grant him that." Alba unbuttoned the single button of her Loro Piana jacket and placed her tablet on a long steel console. She did not look nervous. She looked like a general who had just observed a minor, predictable skirmish. "He was always a terrible actor," Alba said, her voice cool and even. She walked over and accepted the glass from Victor. "All volume, no substance. He thinks screaming is a form of power. It's just noise." He looked distressed, Victor observed, watching her closely. Alba took a small, composed sip. "He isn't distressed, Victor. He simply realized he lost. He mistakes the consequences of his own actions for a personal tragedy." A small, genuine smile touched Victor's lips. 8 years. You were with him for 8 years, and he never, for a single second, saw you, did he? "He saw what he wanted to see," Alba said, turning to look at the main screen where the London, New York, and Tokyo markets were ticking away. He saw a beautiful, quiet, complementary object. He saw his own reflection. It was his greatest comfort and his most catastrophic vulnerability. Well, his comfort is about to be permanently removed. Victor picked up a small black remote. "Anya and Ravi are patched in from Geneva. Time for the briefing." Alba walked to the main screen, which displayed a complex, spiderweb-like diagram of Marcus's shell companies. "This," she said, pointing to a cluster of firms, "is what he thought was the prize, the apex deal, a multi-billion-dollar scam. The whole thing was a lie." She tapped a key on the console, and the diagram shifted, highlighting a single, dark holding company at the bottom. But this is what he actually owned. This is the value. "What is it?" Victor asked, leaning closer. "It's a clean energy technology firm he acquired 3 years ago," Alba explained, her voice quickening with the passion she only showed for data. "He bought it for the real estate, a factory in Charleston. He stripped the assets and buried the company. But he is so intellectually lazy, he never ran a full audit of its IP. He never read the file." She typed another command. A new file appeared. "Dormant patents for next-generation solid-state battery cell recharge technology. They aren't just theoretical, Victor. They are fully proven. The R&D is done. This," she tapped the screen, "is a trillion-dollar technology, and it has been sitting in a filing cabinet in a company he cataloged as extinct." "My God," Victor exclaimed. He was so focused on the scam. He was willing to burn the truth to feed it, Alba finished. He was going to let this entire thing go bankrupt to be sold for scrap, just so he could get a quick, fraudulent $2 billion. He's not just a criminal, Victor. He's a bad businessman. Victor Hayes was silent for a long moment, simply staring at the screen, and then back at Alba. The amusement was gone, replaced by a deep, calculating respect. "He's a gambler," Victor said finally, "and you, Alba, are the house." He walked over to a polished teak desk on the other side of the salon. He pulled out a thick, leather-bound prospectus. "The Hayes Group is not going to acquire the Apex portfolio," he said, his voice formal. "We are not in the business of cleaning up other people's toxic messes." He walked back and placed the heavy document on the console in front of her. "We are in the business of funding visionaries. Vance Capital." Alba looked down. On the cover, in clean, silver-embossed lettering, were 2 words: Vance Capital. She stared, her composure momentarily broken. Her breath hitched. It was the name she had scribbled in a notebook in her MIT dorm room a lifetime ago. "This is not a job offer, Alba," Victor said, his voice soft. "It's an investment. The Hayes Group will provide $5 billion in seed capital. You will be the CEO. You will lead the acquisition. You will run the company. You will be the majority shareholder. We will simply be your silent partners." He leaned in, his expression intense. "I'm not doing you a favor. You just walked in here and handed me the greatest investment opportunity of the decade. I'm betting on the analyst, not the assets, and I intend to win." Alba looked from the prospectus to Victor's face, 1,000 emotions battling behind her eyes. Before she could speak, her satellite phone vibrated. She answered the call, her voice a flat line. "It's neutralized, officially." She turned to her team on the video call. "Anya, Ravi, execute." "Execute what?" Victor asked. "We aren't going to wait for receivership. That's messy. It will take years. The patents will get tied up in litigation. We're going to the board now, the one that's left, and we're offering to pay off their legitimate investors. A total buyout of the legitimate assets effective immediately." "You aren't even going to discount the price?" Victor asked, impressed. "I'm not a scavenger, Victor. I'm a surgeon," Alba said. "We will cut out the cancer, Marcus's fraud, and save the patient. The technology. We aren't buying his worthless, fraudulent company. We are acquiring its single invaluable asset, the one he was too stupid to see." Victor stared at her, and then threw his head back and laughed, a deep, powerful sound that filled the room. "My God, Alba, you aren't just taking his company. You are taking his legacy and rewriting it from scratch." He walked to the bar and poured a second glass, this time from a crystal decanter containing a dark amber liquid. He handed it to her. "He thought you were a painting," Victor said, his voice full of admiration. "Something beautiful and quiet to hang on a wall. He never, ever realized you were the architect." He raised his glass to Vance Capital. Alba looked at the name on the prospectus and then at her mentor. She raised her glass, the clink of the crystal sealing the deal. "To the balance sheet," she corrected, a small, private smile on her lips. "It's finally balanced." She took a sip. It was an 18-year-old Macallan. It tasted like victory. Cold, clean, and absolute. Outside, the sun was setting over Saint-Tropez, but in the command center of the sovereign, Alba Vance's world had just begun. The architect's legacy. Conclusion. The story of Alba Vance teaches us one powerful lesson. Never mistake silence for weakness. Marcus saw his wife as a beautiful decoration, and his arrogance was his undoing. He failed to see the brilliant mind working behind those quiet eyes. A mind that wasn't plotting revenge, but calculating his final move. She didn't fight for his scraps because she was already planning to buy his entire company. She didn't argue over the divorce settlement because she was positioning herself to become the billionaire, not just marry one. Final question for our audience. What did you think of Alba's final power move? Was her victory the most ruthless or the most deserved? Let us know in the comments. If you love stories where the underestimated protagonist wins in the most epic way possible, be sure to like this video. Share it with a friend who needs a reminder of their own power, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible drama and twists. Don't miss what comes next.